Hello my friends, and welcome back to Meerkat Musings. Welcome back to another edition of the Meerkat Muse on a very special day for me personally, because today marks 20 years since I met my wife. So that is naturally a very good place upon which to begin. It's kind of like just, in some respects, it really does feel like I've blinked and all of a sudden there's 20 years of memories there, and it's just wow. I mean, I met her at a point where I rather, upon reflection, stupidly believed that I probably wasn't going to find someone. I was melodramatic, shall we say, back then about my prospects for love, and I didn't really, I guess, have the confidence that I would actually meet someone. And it was almost when I got to the point where I stopped trying that I was able to actually move things along, as it were. And I met the woman who would become my wife via an online forum. We arranged to meet up in London. We arranged actually to do it as part of a group thing, but that didn't actually pan out that way. So it was just me and her. We spent the day together in London, and we just clicked. That was that. We hit it off, and we've been together ever since. It's never always been, and it never is, of course, completely plain sailing. Of course it's not. I mean, relationships aren't like that. I've driven her mad. She's driven me mad. We've had our ups and our downs. But here we are, 20 years later, and the sum of all that kind of experience and history, all those memories we forged together, it's something that lasts a lifetime. And from that love that we share, I am blessed to have a wonderful daughter as well. And we are this I think this lovely little family unit that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. And I feel very, very lucky to have that, because I've been an idiot more than once and somehow not driven her away. And so therefore I feel very, very fortunate and very, very lucky that I have this wonderful woman in my life, and that I've had her in my life for 20 years now. And it really is just crazy. One thing I also reflect upon is this day 20 years ago, it was bright and sunny, and this day today, it is wet and dreary, which goes to show what a difference 20 years can make to the weather in the UK. It's just absolutely crazy of late. But I'm not going to spend too much time in this muse bemoaning the weather, only to say that the end of June was actually quite hot and lovely, and for some reason July, someone's turned the sprinklers on. It's the only way that I can sort of describe July. It's just been relentlessly damp. I mean, not just a little bit, but it's been relentless. I've been meaning to cut the grass, as much as I hate gardening. I mean, I really do loathe gardening. But I can't do that while the ground is wet, because it will just be horrific. So I have to wait for an opportunity where it's dry when I'm off work. And so far, that opportunity has not arisen. But speaking of rising opportunities, so this is where we have ourselves a bit of a contradiction and so much confusion. So as you may know, it's the European Championships going on right now in Germany, and I have watched England somehow fail upwards over the course of this competition. The results have been, well, quite frankly, they've been mediocre. The performances have been poor by the standards of the players that we've got. And despite all of this, England are through to the semi-finals of the European Championships. And today, as it so happens, we will play the Netherlands for a place in the final, where if we get to the final, we'll face Spain. I'm not convinced we'll get by the Netherlands, to be honest, but if we do get through to the final, Spain, they'll be rubbing their hands with glee. And why wouldn't they? Spain have been the best team in the tournament by far, and England really have been among the most tepid and tame teams to possibly ever grace the tournament. Things improved in the last game against Switzerland. There's no denying that. There was a change of formation and style, and it did yield a better performance. But there's still plenty of room to improve. And if England really do think they have a chance of winning this thing, then they've really got to step up. And they've got to step up by a fairly big margin, starting tonight against the Netherlands. And then if, as I say, by some miracle we get through to the final, we've got to step it up even more against the Spanish, because the Spanish have been the best team at the Euros by a considerable margin. I'm not optimistic, but then again, I never am with the England football team these days. That's 40 or so years of false starts and misery will do to you in a sporting sense. But in another sporting sense, I must express my delight at seeing Lewis Hamilton win the British Grand Prix the other day. My small claim to fame is that I hail from the same town as Lewis. We never met. I hasten to stress that point. Moved in different circles completely. But nonetheless, to see someone from Stevenage reach such incredible heights in something that I personally absolutely love, namely Formula One, has been an absolute sight to behold. And he's gone through a barren patch in the wake of the new 2022 regulations. So for him to get a win, particularly to get a win at Silverstone at the British Grand Prix, his 104th Grand Prix win, that was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant. He had a little bit of luck to get there, but sometimes you make your own luck as well, and the best drivers will put themselves into the pocket, so to speak, so that if opportunities come up, they can take advantage of them. And that is exactly what Lewis did, and I'm really, really pleased for him, absolutely thrilled that he was able to get across that finish line and take the victory. Speaking of victories, I've mentioned this elsewhere, but we did, of course, have a general election last week, and from the perspective of someone who wanted to see the backside of the Tories, it could not have gone better. Labour ended up with a majority of 171, I believe it was, more than double that of the previous Tory majority. So a sensational turnaround in British politics. Some people actually are complaining that the result is somewhat skewed by the first past the post system, which, to be fair, in some respects it is, just like it was skewed last time when the Tories won. And oddly enough, you didn't get the same kind of complaints from the right-wingers that we are now. There's been a surge in support for the Reform Party, which is quite troubling in some respects, because the Reform Party is basically the Tories on steroids. They have 5 MPs in Parliament. They are not a party of the people. These are all people who are very, very rich and well off and will act in their own interests. To be fair, that's what most politicians do of any party. But if anyone thinks reform will actually change the country for the better, they are deluding themselves. Reform will act in their own self-serving interests, and they're simply the Tories on steroids, which guarantees they will be self-serving parasites. So I, for one, somewhat dismayed by the surge in support they got, although they did split the right-wing vote quite heavily, and that's one of the reasons why, in a twist of irony, Reform have more or less given Labour a huge majority and seen to it that the Tories have suffered, I think, their worst ever election defeat. So how about that as a safe irony? The other thing is about proportional representation. Although Reform would get more seats, also so would the Green Party. In fact, they'd have a similar number of seats to the Reform Party in that system. And they actually do now anyway, as it happens. Reform have 5 seats, the Greens have 4. And the Greens have a platform much more in keeping with what I think are worthwhile British values. And so it's nice to see that they've actually gone forward and grown as a political party. Whether or not they can push on from here is a difficult one. The trouble is Reform tend to get a lot more media attention than the Greens do, which skews the narrative. And if the Greens had a similar amount of airtime, then there's no telling how much better they may do. But until the press takes a more balanced approach to that kind of thing, who knows? What can we say? The Liberal Democrats would also benefit from proportional representation, although to be fair, they won a host of seats anyway and have grown significantly from their previous election standings. They took a lot of seats from the Tories in the southwest of the country, and I think in the southwest, which is traditionally a Tory heartland, I think for a lot of voters down there, it was unpalatable for them to consider voting Labour, but the surge in support for the Lib Dems nonetheless took the Tories perhaps, maybe not by surprise, but it certainly took them out of the running in a lot of seats. The net result of it all is we now have a Labour government. How, of course, that goes, well, we can but wait and see. I have offered up my misgivings about modern Labour more than once. I do think they're better than the Tories. That is a low bar to clear, but I think that this Labour government will go on to clear that bar, and then all we can do is wait and see what happens over the span of, well, the next few months, the next few years. Will they do enough to keep in power? Will they change the country for the better? And one way people measure that is, of course, by pound coins in the pocket. But we'll also be looking at things like NHS waiting times. People will look at things like the sewage and the water that the Tories have been pumping in there. All that kind of stuff people will be looking at in earnest over the next few years. It's a big task for Labour because they've inherited something of a mess, and they now need to take their time and fix it properly, which means they can't be hasty. And I think patience is the word. But we'll see how that goes. Speaking of patience, that's something I'm having to sort of do at work more of late. There's been a few occasions lately where I've just felt a little bit under the cosh, and that's in no small part because, I don't know, where I've been battling hay fever and where the hay fever meds have left me feeling quite tired because they do make me drowsy, I just haven't been in the mood for people. Save for a select few people that I like. The trouble is, when you work in retail, when you work in sales, you have to deal with people, of course you do. So that's meant that I have had to deal with plenty of people. And in some cases, these people have timed their arrival into the store in what, in my view, is the worst possible set of circumstances. It's not the customer's fault, really. Of course it's not. But, well, I'll say that in some cases, I think actually it is. And this comes across as somewhat whiny, and I know it comes across as whiny, but it is simply the way that I feel in my soul about this. And it frustrates me immensely when certain things keep happening, Whenever I want to get a bite to eat, that seems to be the go time for when customers come into the store. It can be empty until that point. And then just when I think to myself, I'm going to grab my sandwich, people come in through the door, which is absolutely insanely aggravating. And I don't know how, but it happens again and again and again. It can literally be that point where I think, right, I'm going to get something to eat. People walk in. And they're not necessarily looking to buy anything. They're just looking to perhaps browse and faff around a little bit. And the whole while I'm thinking, well, I can't really eat because they might ask me a question. But equally, they're probably not going to do anything. And it's just like, oh, why is it always the way? It's not, as I say, anyone's fault per se, but it is, in my view, more aggravating, and it is, to a certain degree, the customer's responsibility here when they show up at, say, 10 minutes before due to close, and they want to then spend a bit of time browsing and faffing about. Our opening hours are not a secret. They are well known. They are advertised on our website via social media, and you can, of course, call the store to find them out. So people who come in, with like, say, 20 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go, and they expect to swan around and take their time while we're trying to close down the store. I just think, to be honest with you, that's a little bit rude in some respects. If you've had all day to come in and you're choosing to come in at the death and you are causing us to be late getting out, then I'm not particularly inclined to view you in a favourable sense, and I'm almost not particularly inclined to even try to help you, which sounds wrong. I know it does, and I will try and help you, but I guarantee you, if you're the sort of person that goes into any retail establishment shortly before closing time, I guarantee you every single member of staff in that store is quietly hating your guts. It's one thing to rush in somewhere very quickly to buy something as a matter of urgency. If you pop into somewhere like, say, W.H. Smith, for example, because you need to grab some printer ink or some paper or whatever, and you're in and out in a couple of minutes, that's a little bit different. If you go into somewhere like, say, DFS Sofas, for example, or Oak Furnitureland, or somewhere like that, if you stroll in there 10 minutes before closing time and you just plan to wander around aimlessly while staff are trying to actually get ready to leave, I guarantee you that you're going to be despised. You've had all day, the staff have been there all day, they are tired, they want to go home, they want to spend some time with their loved ones, and now quite possibly you're delaying the exit of them because you haven't managed your time correctly and you've just decided to faff around. That kind of thing is unnecessary, and I wish that more people would kind of like understand that a little bit better. And to a certain degree, the same thing does also apply to lunch breaks. Generally speaking, between the hours of 12 and 2, in a lot of shops, people will be going to lunch. And, we who work in retail and in sales kind of need to eat as well. We're not robots. So when you get a flurry of customers coming in at lunchtime, again, it's a little bit inconsiderate. So obviously sometimes it can't be helped, but I would like people to be a little bit more aware that we're not machines, we are human beings, we need to eat, we would like to get home on time to see our families, and therefore, how you time these things as a customer does matter, and showing a little bit of consideration, from the other side, so to speak, wouldn't always be a bad thing. But hey ho, rant over. As I say, I needed to get that out of my system because it is aggravating, to put it mildly. What's less aggravating and just confusing is some of the incredibly weird dreams I've had of late. I went through a spell where I couldn't really remember my dreams, which might be a good thing. But I've since had a few dreams I have rather starkly remembered. One of them involved some sort of mission to help out Bucky Barnes, to help the Winter Soldier with some distressing memories. And it involved going to... It was like an abandoned theme park in Russia, I want to say. And there were lots of like sort of mannequins lying around everywhere. So it was like, what was it, like a fake theme park? I don't know. And there was a bunch of nondescript soldiers there. Bucky Barnes was there. Captain America was there. My wife would have liked this dream. And at one point I can remember having to zip line across this lake. And I remember ending up in the water at one point. It wasn't very deep, but it was aggravating because I was carrying a rucksack or something that didn't want to get wet. And then I remember going into this building where we were confronted by some sort of interdimensional portal, and there was a scientist trying to get this under control. And then we went through a door and we were in a games arcade, and for some reason we were then playing, I think it was Mario Kart, and we were playing this with Donald Trump, who was there for some bizarre, strange reason. And if anyone knows what that dream means, do feel free to drop me a comment and let me know, because I, for one, have absolutely no idea what my subconscious was trying to tell me in that particular nocturnal adventure. So we come to the end of my latest Muse. As ever, there is a written account of this over at meerkatmusings.co.uk, and that will be more detailed than anything that I've kind of spoken about here. I hope that you check it out, and I hope that you enjoy these little muses. As to what comes next, well, come the next Muse, or the end of the next Muse, we'll know if England have, by some miracle, managed to win the European Championships. I really don't think they will. But if they do, then this Meerkat might have a sore head come the end of the night. But other than that, I don't think there's anything major coming up in the next couple of weeks, other than having to get on with the gardening, which I absolutely hate and loathe and despise. But I can't really ignore it. Part of the problem is, as I say, the weather's simply been horrendous, and I need it to be dry for a march of days, dry and sunny, and then I can get out there and do it properly, because it's not really a good idea to cut the grass when it's wet. So all I can do is just watch the weather and hope that we start to get an improvement over the coming days. Who knows? I don't know what the weather actually says. And other than that, there's nothing else really. There's nothing else really sort of coming up in my immediate sort of world. So we'll just take one day at a time, as we always do. And I will talk to you all in a couple of weeks. Love you all. Take care.